And it's about farmers. It's about,
that is a good start. Coming back off a spring break, another off the record on the rocks. Cheers to you.
Cheers to you. This is number 110. Are we recording number 110?
I hope so, because we're going to say it here from the jump. We're going to call it 110. I believe it is.
It doesn't even matter. This is number 110.
Coming off a spring break, feeling the vibes. We've got a ton to get to. I mean, just looking at the headlines over the last few weeks, the market has been insanity. You can't make, again, we've been covering this for so long. I become very immune to all the FUD and the news in the marketplace, the ups and down swings of public companies. This week we've got earnings from the Magnificent Seven: Tesla, Apple, Google. Everyone's issuing earnings. They're revising guidance, as they call it, on CNBC. Meanwhile, Trump is out there glad-handing, making deals. Whether he's actually making deals or not, the markets are being made, aka acquisitions, aka partnerships, PayPal getting even deeper into the crypto world. We've got OpenAI making deals for Chrome. We've got Mark Zuckerberg back on Capitol Hill talking about breaking up Meta, spinning off fractions of this so-called monopoly. There's blood in the streets, right? Everything's on sale. Tesla's down 50%. The stock is down 50%. But do you really think that Elon just spent the last 100 days on Capitol Hill only to lose 50% of his company's value?
Grab a drink. It's time for another episode of Off the Record on the Rocks. Join Michael Toner and Ankarina Lara as we discuss the latest in all things Web3, AI, metaverse, and crypto. Tune out the noise and turn up the signal as we pour ourselves into the future. Better make mine a double.
They're not going anywhere, and neither is anybody else. I don't know where to start other than OpenAI making a bid for Google Chrome. Called it here on the show. We'll have to pull the receipts. Episode 60 something years ago. We've been talking about it. What's good?
I mean, the thing to me that is most interesting about the Google news is that, well, first we called it. So like a little hand clap and a toast, right? Look, we knew that OpenAI was going to make a move somewhere. And if we believed that the future of that move is not into an AI world and a metaverse world that is predicated on you wearing some kind of a goggle or a glasses, then the metaverse, what we think of the metaverse and AI is going to have to be accessible to everyone wherever they are. And what is the one thing we said that everyone forgets about? Everyone forgets that everyone's experience starts and stops in a browser. And if you are in the business of being a company like OpenAI, you need to have your whole Chat GPT, Sora, DALL-E, the list now of their services and products goes on and on. They've done partnerships, kind of sounds like plugins, if to use an old browser term. And sometimes if you have a whole bunch of plugins, you need to plug them in somewhere. And the easiest place to do that is in a browser. And over the years, Chrome has become a darling of the development community. So we called it. It's really interesting and important. We know the DOJ wants to break them up. We know that Sundar Pichai has to sell this thing off. Who would be the obvious person? It's going to be Sam Altman and OpenAI. The part about this story, though, that's super, super interesting is it really does show the Web 2-ness of what Google is. Because if you were talking about earnings at the top, you were talking about people giving guidance updates. We're talking about traditional Wall Street mechanics of quarterly updates, giving guidance to the street, having the street respond. Sometimes there'll be a stock that, did way overperformed, says Wall Street, but somehow then at the closing bell, it goes down because there's all these weirdness of the pricing in and stuff. So a lot of craziness that happens. But what did Google do? Google came out with a better than expected outcome from Q1. And what did they do with a whole bunch of the money? If you were in a Web3 world, if you were in a crypto world, you might say, I'm going to buy some Bitcoin. But no, they bought back, I want to say, was it $70 billion worth of stock? They did a stock buyback with all this cash, which to me, it seemed like you really, maybe it comes down to the point that Sometimes you got to know what lane you're in. And if Google's going to sell Chrome to OpenAI and say that's Web3 AI, then what is Google? They had better than expected search performance. Get back to the basics and let's buy some stock back. And that's how they're going to live. They're not Web3. They're not Metaverse. They're Google.
And look, I think the important thing I mentioned Meta. You just said Metaverse. I talked about Mark Zuckerberg retaking the hill. Let's not forget. And in fact, this story, this was from Ars Technica. This was the remedy phase of Google's antitrust trial is underway, with the government angling to realign Google's business after the company was ruled a search monopolist, right? The DOJ is now, as part of that penalty, forcing Google to sell Chrome. It is up to the highest bidder. And who's got more money than anybody? Who took more B's than anybody but Sam Altman? It's just up for the highest bidder, right? And the same thing, just play that timeline. The last 18 months, Google Chrome, here comes the money coming into Sam Altman's hands. All the fumbles of, was it Microsoft? Who's on the board? Effective altruism, all of that stuff. Now OpenAI is going to end up buying their way into the HTTP protocol. Let's call it what it is. It is at that base level. We've talked about email here on the show. We've talked about ownership in Web3, and in that the fact that email is one of the original protocols. So is HTTP, right? So is the ability to publish to the internet. But who has taken control over it? Chrome. And my point there, just to play it forward the next 18 months, Zuckerberg's about to walk down this same red carpet. He's going to walk down this exact same red carpet. It's going to play out a little bit different in that the final ruling, as these social networks get broken up, guess what I've been calling on the show? Threads.
Mm-hmm.
The ability to immediately stand up the Fediverse. These decentralized social networks are going to need a new protocol, a base layer, and he's going to be there ready to turn on his version of the metaverse now after all these apps get broken up. I mean, I just see it playing forward the next 18 months, and he already had to have the fix ready.
You have to have the fix ready. You have to also have the access. So let's not forget, part of why these moves are happening is because everyone was lined up in a row, sitting to what would have been stage left of POTUS, and everyone representing, the FANG companies, but you call it the Gorgeous Seven or the Magnificent Seven. Like they're there waiting to basically have their moment on the red carpet to give their contribution to the United States of America. So I was thinking a lot about, you remember that story came, as might have been 6, 7, 8 episodes ago now, maybe a little more, but there were these nichifications, these highly focused niche versions of technology products that were starting to get teased, right? So like there was going to be a gov.chatGPT, or effectively a government only use of an AI assistant that would be cordoned off. Let's go back to 30 years now. And remember, there was no iPhones in the White House when Obama was president. Not that many years, 20. No iPhones. Why weren't there any iPhones? Well, we need it locked down. We need Blackberries. BlackBerry was the gov.iPhone of the time, right? So now we got all these knuckleheads up there using Signal, talking about blowing up Houthi boats. It seems to me, just to take your thread to the next level with Threads, is that Zuckerberg is about to tee up a gov.threads. Like, right now is the moment. All those guys who are lined up in the rotunda are salivating. They're like, you're using Signal for the United States of America to make it great again? No. You're using gov.threads. You're using blank. What are they using? I see you getting animated.
Dude, I just went to Workplace. The failed attempt of Facebook to bring enterprise social networks into the business, including a financial institution that I worked at, that I ran the pilot program, where it was credit union Facebook.com. We had a private social network that was meant for just employee engagement, where you could share photos from internal presentations and meetings and internal decks and assets and things that now I'm realizing, now I could have my AI bot be taking notes in a meeting, my agent that I'm going to own as an employee. I go to a different spot now. That's a whole nother layer. We got to come to this. Having come out of ETHDC here in Washington last week, the second annual crypto conference. Really, I mean, it is the crypto capital.
Unfortunately named, by the way, and give time as being what they are.
We have trying to actually move it to just crypto capital away from ETHDC to be a little bit more inclusive, if you will.
The E and DEI doesn't stand for Ethereum. Come on, rename that. You know it.
But yes, no doubt. Look, I think that's crazy. I think that is exactly what I now see playing out, because that whole thing went dark. That pilot
it went totally quiet, and like what you're describing, look, my first swing at my first big company was about saving and sharing the moments of your life and creating these private little enclaves, to use a term that everyone loves to use these days, where you could create that community, but it's completely locked down. There were a number of companies that were trying to do this, and of course, we know the history played out that you lock everything down, then you never grow. So they have the growth, they have the scale, but now the question is, will it be a version of Sam Altman's hope? If he does the acquisition, privately gated Chrome browser experience for the government, or is it going to be Mark Zuckerberg's private threads for the government? Because then you could always know exactly who has access per a .gov email address. This is Mark Zuckerberg 101. Facebook, how come I can't join? You don't have a .edu. Oh, now we're opening to corporations. Oh, now you have .com. Well, guess who only has .gov email addresses? The government. And yet no one has just gone back and dusted off that old magic book and been like, hey, there's a thing called Threads. It's kind of like Twitter. You used to like Twitter. That X thing over there seems weird. Use my new thing called Threads. And by the way, you can't log in unless you have a .gov email address. That's all you got to say in the Oval Office. They're like, done. It's about to be announced. Watch, Signal's going to get bounced out of the DOJ and the DOD, and they're going to be bringing in some social networkified version or lockdown
to solve
version of
this
that
problem. There's a problem that's been created, a problem that got put on the table, and the American people seems to understand this is not okay. You cannot be doing that. And so therefore, we're going to need a net new solution. Look, I'm going to keep going down the OpenAI path for a second.
Yes.
One thing that's got my attention, in addition to Sam Altman's looking at buying Chrome, there's been some leaked code of integrations with Shopify. And so now think AI agent shopping bots effectively be able to describe to your agent, to your ChatGPT, hey, I'm going to the White House Correspondents' Dinner on Friday night, and I need a fancy tuxedo, and I'd like it to be blue, and I plan to, arrive by 6. It's going to be 60 degrees, and it literally would give you the options right there in the chat window. So there's a new behavior that I think is going to start to emerge in this. OpenAI now has a stronghold on what was search. If they're removing it from Chrome, then you think, well, they just beat Chrome, right? Like the search behaviors moved over here to ChatGPT. What do they need the browser for? Well, all the e-commerce data, all the shopping stuff, all the things that you would need to just suck in. And I think you said this, and we've talked about content being liquid and what have you. But now e-commerce images are liquid. What do I mean by that? Well, they're not going to maybe exist inside of the way you think of Chrome today, but you're going to be able to chat your way through a shopping experience and literally generate the SERP. And the SERP landing page isn't going to look like a listing. It's going to look like a shopping mall. It's going to look like, hey, I'm shopping for a suit.
And how about there is this one-to-one that we expect. When you talk about that, this is why I think where there's going to be this interesting there's a disconnect that I think will exist for only people who are it's so deep in the know. And we talk about protocols. Well, the cognitive dissonance of the protocols is an HTTP protocol, meaning a hypertext transfer protocol, a link, a URL, a universal resource locator. Those things only operate in the Web 1 and the Web 2 world. And the way they operate is because there are browsers. So you can see them. You can see the string of off the record, on the rocks, dot, Spotify, dot, or whatever it is. You know where it is. And it's always there. It's one to one. What I think is going to be this interesting departure is when OpenAI takes over the notion of a browser and you're now chatting into it as opposed to dropping in what are like ISBN numbers for books or reference locator numbers. You're dropping in an idea, a chat, a part of a conversation, which will return a plurality of results and information, which are never going to be one-to-one anymore. So now you have disintermediated the need for a search bot to run down the annals and halls of the internet and come back with the one resource you wanted to locate. In fact, it comes back with a whole idea of things and then recommends other things that you haven't even thought of yet. So that whole protocol thing now, I think it's very bendy. I would go so far to say that now the protocols are liquid. The indices are liquid, multi-referential.
Where I started to get excited as you're talking about that is, yes, I believe everything you just described. Therefore, a need for proof of provenance, meaning I'm going to need, when I'm chatting with this thing, as it's coming back to me with the 50 ideas. By the way, 3 of the suits that it's pulling up are fake. They came off of synthetic images of synthetic avatars that aren't actually for sale, or I can't actually wear them. Right, they were enough within the protocol to trick the AI to now serving it to me as though it's purchasable. Right, that's not okay. So now we may be getting at the Web 2.5 here, which is at a protocol layer, strings and URLs now interfacing with smart contracts. And this was a huge topic of conversation at the ETHDC event. Specifically around the immutability of smart contracts. And the conversation really went towards specifically a lot of the marketplaces that were not delivering royalties back for NFTs when a blockchain asset was purchased. If the smart contract had written in sort of the opportunity to tip the artist, but it was optional. You didn't have to do it. You didn't have to give back the 5%. The smart contract was not enforcing this royalty. But think about that. That's literally the blending of Web 2 and Web 3, which is a real money versus the smart contract, which should be immutable and should be permanent and should be able to say, no, every time you buy this, 5% of the proceeds should go back to the original creator. And where I'm going with that is, when this AI, as you're describing, it's chatting its way through a shopping experience or any other research experience, it's bringing me back information from multiple fronts where, deep research, and it's bringing it back. It's going to need to know that it's authentic. It's going to need to know the provenance.
And there is some origin.
And to me, blockchain is the solution to that. Blockchain then becomes where did this come from? Is there real money behind the other side of it? You could tell if it was a Abercrombie ad or, a Sears suit based on the wallet address that it got served to me. And if I click buy, right, my agent is now smart enough to know this is going to the J. Crew Web3 wallet. It's an actual suit. It's actually going to ship it to me. It's a reputable brand. It's not a third-party reseller. It wasn't used.
And in the contract, it's not an optional checkbox to pay or not pay for it.
Right.
Because now we're now saying these smart contracts are binding.
Thank you.
Purchase agreements.
Exactly.
It's just taking a toggle and flipping it. So with the way you describe that, I mean, in that Web 2.5 analogy, which I like this because now you can almost think of today's, when people say Web 3, is that a layer 2 of Web 2.5? Because up till now, Web 3 has been, we really haven't seen, at least from, let's say, talk about consumers, retail, people like us, right? Not big corporations. AI is a bit of a parlor trick still, right? It's fun to ask something a question and then have it bring you back 10 ideas for like how you're going to name your daughter's birthday party, or these like casual use cases. I bought all of these things last year. Here's an interesting one about your whole purchasing thing, because the purchasing behaviors of us, we have in some cases decades long histories of purchases. And on the show have long been screaming from the mountaintops that the best indicator of someone's interests has nothing to do with their search terms, has nothing to do with their tweets, has nothing to do with their likes on Facebook. It actually has to do with their Amazon purchases, and the ones that were delivered and not returned. It has to do with a full, call it a proof of purchase, a proof of work. I want
sounds
to
very
know.
ethereal above you.
Well, not proof of stake, proof of work. And it's that I know this. And if you look at a human over time, I know all of our patterns, and it knows all of the birthdays of all the people in your life, and it knows of all the holidays, and it knows of all the obvious things. And then it will find the ones that are not obvious. Even to this day, right now, one of the biggest magic tricks that's not even Web3 or even AI related is how Amazon will have local distribution centers in your area that will often have the thing that you need right away and can bring it to you in an hour. And people wonder, how is that possible? It's really not that hard. Look at a zip code, look what everybody orders, and then you can just stock a local place with 50% of that stuff, and you're probably going to deliver on it. And it gets more and more bizarre. And just by looking at the things, you can see what's going on in your area. Are people having kids? Are people mostly young? Like, what's going on? You'll see those show up in those results. So now when you talk about your agent, that layer 2 on Web 2.5, the layer 2 is the agent, the Web3 agent you created that is going to just go and act on your behalf. It's my digital shopping twin. And so now you're going to get a box that shows up, and inside it's going to be a little note, and then or inside's a QR code, and you're going to ping a QR code, and you're going to see an avatar of yourself, just like Hauser and Quaid in Total Recall, telling yourself, hey, your future self just bought these 3 things because we think your sister would like one of them. You haven't given it to her for her birthday yet. Then you'll return 2 of them, and you won't even have to think.
I mean, look, I think the purchase piece of this to me brings me all the way around to Bitcoin.
Proof of purchase. Show me your receipts. Show me your receipts.
Michael Saylor continuing to make headlines, buying more. I heard today, again, watching the brief Squawk Box interview on CNBC, they were talking to the CEO. I'm going to blank on exactly who it was, but he was basically talking about their ability to offer crypto products to the market, and that they see that beginning to happen more and more, clients asking for it, like that narrative breaking through in the earnings call. The CEO now publicly saying we are going to bake in even lending, talking about crypto lending. And he mentioned the idea of who was custodying the assets and the ability to get loans against your crypto assets as though they were any other asset. I take all of that. A couple of headlines to get to. One, the Federal Reserve withdrawing the guidance for banks to use crypto assets. That was news breaking, I think, last week. So this was
end of last week. Yeah.
Related to changes in its expectations to these activities. This was April 24th at 5:30 from the Federal Reserve Board of Governors, that they withdraw the guidance. This ensures it rescinded its 2022 supervisory letter establishing an expectation that state member banks provide advance notice of planned or current crypto asset activities. So literally, this is the Federal Reserve Bank saying, you don't have to tell us anymore, banks, if you plan to take on a crypto activity. You know what that tells me is, like, we just expect that banks are now going to be running crypto activity. Please don't bother us with the news. Please don't come tell us. We don't care anymore. We understand that this is running and we feel good about it. I take all of that news and then I couple it with the headline you send. Cantor teams up with Tether and SoftBank for the $3.6 billion crypto venture, literally taking a playbook from MicroStrategy to the company will exist solely for the purpose of acquiring Bitcoin.
Pure acquisition.
That's it.
And when you sent, so Saylor posted on X, banks are now free to begin supporting Bitcoin, which was like the key indicator. Then that Fed Reserve thing that you sent me, a note. But what caught my eye was that as Saylor is now digging his moat, making it wider between his castle Bitcoin and the rest of the world, and is now digging it with just gigantic, those like bagger 3000, just raw earth mining machines. He is digging the moat so big, so fast. He just added, the latest one was what, another 750 million or more in Bitcoin. And gosh, if you can't beat, these guys by just buying it raw, then what do? You pool all the resources together and you create a new company. And that new company, that 21, what's it called? 21, I forget the name now.
I did see it.
The name of it is called 21 Capital. 21 Capital, they're going public. They're launching with 42,000 Bitcoin. And gosh, guess who shows up yet again? Let's not forget that SoftBank, which, if we all remember, is being led by a gentleman named Masayoshi-san out of Japan. He led the $40 billion SoftBank round just 1 month ago into OpenAI. 40 billion, and now is the minority owner in this new thing called 21 Capital, which is basically playing the tortoise and the hare with Thaler's strategy, formerly MicroStrategy. And if you and I and our listeners, based on these indicators, and on top of that, with the current administration's very pro-crypto stance across the boards, if you don't think that this is rapidly becoming the new global currency, I mean, look, what's the one word that we haven't heard since the new administration came in? Well, there's been many, but one that I was listening for, de-dollarization. That was the word that was said. You can't be de-dollarizing the U.S. dollar. What's the global mechanism of settlement? The U.S. dollar. But gosh, 100 days, 120 days later, actually, it looks like some of the largest and most powerful corporations in the world, including the U.S. government, is saying, maybe in the long run, it isn't the U.S. dollar. Maybe in the long run, it isn't any fiat dollar, but it is an immutable ledger that is of a finite resource that if we can control the majority of, then we will control the new world order. I feel like we're seeing the streets painted in Bitcoin gold right now, and people aren't seeing it. These are massive amounts of money that are being invested. Massive.
That is maybe the single best statement that you have ever said. Like, I mean, just based on...
Hey, cheers. Thanks for that.
If we control at least half of it, then we can control the new world order. It's not going to be called the US dollar. It might be transferred in USDC, but it's going to be backed by Bitcoin, and all the blood in the streets and all the data that you see shows that the outflows from stocks and bonds from these public companies who are now, redefining guidance for 2025, where is that money flowing to? And a lot of those publicly traded companies who are not, if they're not custodying actual Bitcoin and following Saylor's strategy, then they're taking the second best risk off strategy, which is buying the Bitcoin ETFs. The single biggest days of inflows into the Bitcoin ETFs have corresponded with the outflows from the public markets. It's not like this money is coming out and people are selling their stocks and bonds and putting cash in their mattress. Nobody is doing that. Where are they putting it? They are buying Bitcoin either directly
or paper Bitcoin
or
ETFs.
Paper Bitcoin on ETFs. Exactly.
Well, and here's something else that kind of opened my eyes over the weekend. I was talking to a couple of people who were former hedge fund guys, and because my question that is really hard for anyone to answer, we've tried to answer this a million times on the show, is when you get something like an article that says BlackRock Bitcoin ETF buys $970 million as the inflows surge.